Capital improvement plan. I know this is a part that everybody's very excited about getting into. This, I've got two slides that capture the list as previously seen and discussed by council. So some of the projects that we're familiar with, obviously a lot of these are either very high priority projects or we're obligated in some form or fashion to conduct these projects. So obviously 202 widening, a very important project. Right now we're budgeting about $17 million all in on that. That's design and construction. Grid Road, and we're actually having a lot of conversations, and you'll see in the budget, I think going to be pretty successful on grant revenues for that. So I think there's some excitement down the road coming on that. I think a lot of granting agencies are very excited about that project as we talk more and more about it. We talked about being obligated for a number of projects, and that's a lot of these development related through development agreements where we're contractually obligated. So things like the roundabouts, intersection improvements, et cetera. That takes up a lot of our bandwidth on CIP. We have a couple projects on here you'll see that are, and council's familiar with this, which are just finishing up the tail end of those projects. So like the pedestrian path on 145th, that one's almost done. We have a retainer fee that we won't pay out till that project is accepted at the year mark next year. This is the second half of that list. Again, this is all stuff that the council has seen at the last discussion. The one change I'll note on here, and this was following discussion at the council meeting, was the City Hall car chargers. We're looking at one car charger capable of doing 2 vehicles simultaneously at this point, so down from 2 charges to do 4 vehicles. Looked at the numbers, looked where we could cut those numbers, and we've got that number down to 82,000 from the 263 that you previously saw. So the list you previously saw was at 38,312. We're down to by a couple $100,000 to the 38,131 right now. That's the list you've seen. So then after, and listening at that last council meeting where we discussed CIP, we had some changes that that are included in this budget and certainly should be a topic of conversation with council as we work into this. We have 3 projects that have been added to that since that last conversation and based on council conversation. One of them is that 124th Avenue sidewalk. I have a slide for each of these, so you don't have to try to think where it is right now. 124th Avenue sidewalk from 171st to 160th. This is up on the West Ridge. We have a culvert removal. I'll get into this project too because that's a good one. And in the wood trails, we have $62,000 budgeted for that in the CIP. That, as was discussed earlier this evening, is not new trail development. This is signage and safety improvements necessary to make it, to reduce and mitigate risk at that facility until we eventually do more with that facility. So I think this is a starting point, certainly. So total with those new projects, that puts us at $42,244,000 approximately. So I'm going to go through just those 3 new projects. This is the sidewalk that council, if I understood correctly, was looking to add to the CIP. This runs from 171st Place south to 160th, where we've previously ended some sidewalk projects. This, I think, is the last major stretch of that 124th that doesn't have sidewalk at this point. You can kind of see a portion of it there in the picture. This completes from the last residential neighborhood in Woodinville up on the West Ridge to the school access on 160th. So that's now been added to the budget at a cost of $2.3 million. Yeah, on the east side of the road. Thank you. This one, and council may not be as familiar with this one. This is an interesting one. I've included in this budget with just under $1.7 million expense, a culvert removal in Little Bear Creek in 134. So the city, and this map's kind of hard to see on here, the city owns this property here. We use it for mitigation as we do other projects around the city where on-site mitigation isn't possible. So where some of these projects, like we're impacting wetlands or the creek, we have to do off-site mitigation, and we use this property largely for that. The freeway is right here, just for reference. Fire station's right here. 134th is a little road that goes up here. There's a private property here that's operated as a tow yard, so we have to maintain access to that and for ours. But this is a high priority culvert as we've gone through our different stormwater conversations. Recently, as council probably recalls, WashDOT had replaced and spent a lot of money replacing this culvert here with an underground bridge. Now, this is the next kind of block going up the river or up the creek, Little Bear Creek for salmon. So this project is added for several reasons. One of them is we just received notification that King County Flood Control District has approved a grant of $220,000 to help us with to do the study/design of this project. This project also, we have dedicated swim funds for. There are no other swim CIP projects proposed here, so this would be our one that we have funds already set aside for. And I think this one is a really unique project in that, at least conceptually, our esteemed Public Works Director came up with kind of a very unique idea on this one, and that is we need a bridge for this. We can't do culverts. We have a bridge we're going to be getting rid of across the trestle over here. And so conceptually, at least, our on-call engineers have analyzed that it may be feasible to repurpose part of that bridge for a car bridge over this crossing, which becomes a really cool story when we're lobbying for money and how we spend money efficiently here in Woodinville. So that one is included in this. We can certainly discuss that more, but I thought that was an interesting project to include here. And then finally, I mentioned we have $62,000 included in this budget for the Wood Trails project, and that does not add new trails. Once we get to the point of adding new trails and new facilities and new amenities, we do start triggering some, as the mayor mentioned, some of the ADA requirements, where then all of a sudden that starts snowballing into ADA parking and new trails that are ADA compliant, or at least portions of. So there are some considerations there. Right now, this budget is $62,000, and that's primarily for some signage to, again, I think, spread the word that this is a park. As making it a park, we need to mitigate risk possibility on this. We also need to make sure that we're mitigating any open and obvious safety concerns through there. So obviously, as has been discussed, those trails weren't necessarily constructed by the city. We need to make sure that there aren't any open and obvious safety concerns there that we would now be liable if somebody hurt themselves if we're aware of them and haven't done anything to fix them. So that provides some money to start addressing any safety concerns that might be out there. So the overall takeaway for this budget, and then we can start answering questions and such. This, as I've mentioned, is a different budget climate that the city has enjoyed in recent years. You can see we've had a large gap for a number of years, and that's that operating margin between revenues and expenditures. And that gap closes and crosses actually by the end of 2024. We, for a number of reasons, look at that as likely a temporary situation, given things like the recession that we're expecting and have included impacts in this budget. But we don't know that for sure. And that's where, we'll watch obviously these trends over the next 2 years, but it may necessitate some different conversations for the 25-26 budget as we go through that process, where, for example, we haven't substantially raised tax revenues in years, and it may be something that we need to talk about in the future. And there's different ways to look at that. So right now, neither Mr. Fritz or I are panicking on this, but it is something that we're going to obviously be watching even closer and need to be having some conversations probably in the next 2 years about kind of what happens after 24. So with that, certainly can answer any questions. I know Mr. Fritz is dying to answer questions and correct everything that I just was inaccurate on. But of course, as a public hearing is continuing, and we'll actually continue this public hearing all the way through the adoption of the budget at the end of the year, would suggest we receive any public testimony, answer questions, and then ultimately have council this evening continue that public hearing to the next meeting on November 1st. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry that was so wordy.
Thank you. That was a thorough presentation. Okay, so we do not have to open up public hearing. We can start taking testimony, or we start, okay. So public hearing, do we have people signed up, I assume? A lot of people had a lot of patience and perseverance. Okay. Councilmember Taylor?
Yes, administrative question. The presentation we just looked at is different than what we have here. It's a summary.
if you would clarify the question. This is a summary. A lot of this was pulled directly out of your book.
Right.
Yeah.
Can we get that presentation as well?
Yeah, I'll share the
summary?
presentation with you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, public hearings open. Let's start with Jeff Glickman.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jeff Glickman. I live at 19405 148th Avenue Northeast inside the city limits. I'm here to speak this evening about the Wood Trails Park line item in the 2023-2024 budget. First of all, thank you for the presentation. I'm encouraged to see that there is a line item at this point for Wood Trails, so thank you for that. I'm going to speak to what I've written already and then weave in what we know tonight. I'm the past deputy mayor of the city of Woodinville, past city council member, past chairman of the City of Hood River Planning Commission, so I'm qualified to speak to this issue. Trails and parks have consistently been a top request by Woodinville citizens and was again a top request in the most recent city survey. Despite this, the citizens have had to work for nearly 3 decades to get a park built on the east side of the city. If you do look at your GIS maps, you'll see that there's nothing in 30% of the city, not one park. In 1995, the City Council passed Resolution 93, recognizing a buffer between the industrial and residential areas. This was codified in several ordinances, most notably Ordinance 532 in 2012. To create this buffer, the City Council purchased the Wood Trails property and placed it on the park list, consistent with the legislative intent of both Resolution 93 and Ordinance 532. Then, as was procedurally appropriate, the City Council added Wood Trails to the comprehensive plan. The legislative intent of the Woodinville City Council is documented and clear that it intends to build this park. Despite this, at least as I had known until this evening, the development of Wood Trails Park is not in the city's 2023-2024 budget. So it is in that budget now. I do see the line item. I encourage you to keep it. So please don't delete that as you go through the next series of meetings before you adopt the budget. If there is a fiscal concern, developing the park needn't be done all at once. There's no need to commit $10 million or $1 million, but we do ask that the City Council commit to taking tangible step forward by adding the Wood Trails Park to the budget to back up the documented legislative intent. Even just doing signs, that does the job. So that's a great start, and we'd love to see more. If you can build a parking lot, build a parking lot. I understand you've got some studies under the belt and some plans under the belt, so just build what's feasible. Since many of us envision the Wood Trails Park as a wilderness park, simple rustic trails may suffice. The community is willing to build and maintain the trails for the Wood Trails Park, which further reduces the necessary fiscal commitment from the city. What we do hope and expect is the follow through on the City Council on its legislative intent. So this is well documented and recorded over a very long period of time. Not doing so is unfortunately fraught with both political and legal liabilities. My strong advice to avoid these liabilities is to keep the Wood Trails Park in the 2023-2024 budget, even for a small amount, but under no circumstances leave it unfunded. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Eugene Lamb.
Thank you for hearing me. My name is Eugene Lamb. I live at 19424 153rd Avenue Northeast in the city of Woodinville. My wife and I and our grown children now have lived at that place for 40 years. So I've been in Woodinville before there was a Woodinville. In fact, one of my neighbors is the first mayor, Don Brochet. I too encourage you to keep that line item in there and don't renege on it. I made a couple of notes, if you'll bear with me. I won't take the full 5 minutes. I had like 3 items. And my first concern is anything that can be designated can be undesignated, just the stroke of the pen or a new city council, anything can be changed. So I encourage you to keep that item in there. In a way, it's putting our money where your mouth is. Some of us, and I don't speak for anybody but my wife and myself, I'm not a member of a speaker for an organization or activist group or anything, but sometimes we feel like we're the redheaded stepchild. So we're asking that you throw us a bone once in a while. It seems like we're the piggy bank for all the pet projects for downtown Woodinville, because that's where most of the revenue comes from, at least from property taxes. So I would ask that you put this park to put pencil to the paper and give us the park that we deserve and you say that we're going to get. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave Henry. Gary Harris.
My name is Gary Harris. I live within the city of Woodinville. And I guess I'm disappointed that I didn't get to see all the CIPs before this meeting so that I could go over them and have specific comments. So where can I get that and how soon can I get that?
The budget presented to council this evening will be available for the public on the website by tomorrow, and we'll have hard copies available as required by statute by noon tomorrow. Okay,
so I could come in tomorrow afternoon and I could get a copy and take it home and mark it up. Okay,
that's
good.
Correct.
Thank you. One thing that I didn't mention when I spoke at the beginning of the meeting was regarding another item that I thought was interesting, something called taxable retail sales per capita, which was in your packet. And Woodinville is the second highest city in our region. So we knocked the ball out of the park with our taxable retail sales income. I guess I'm a little more positive about our ability to do the things that we want to do. And I'm going back to wood trails again. So I'm happy to see that there's some money in the budget. But one of the slides that was shown just a little bit ago showed 3 vehicles that are being replaced for a cost of $1.7 million. How many of those are electric vehicles?
I can answer. Let me clarify that it's not 3 vehicles for the $1.7 million. That's the total list. We showed a sample of a couple of those items that are on that list.
Okay.
The electric vehicles, I believe we have 2 of our fleet vehicles. One is an inspector or a truck for our building inspector. The other one is a truck that our engineers use for site visits. Those 2 trucks are, as included in the budget, proposed for electric vehicles. Part of that, and we can certainly talk about this too, and I forgot this when we talked about this last time, it's actually a law on the books in Washington, and I know we've talked about 2030 or 2035 as the governor's goal. Actually a law on the book where local jurisdictions, local governments included, are obligated with, depending on cost analysis, if it's close to equal, are supposed to be buying electric vehicles to replace fleet vehicles to the extent possible. So we'll have to go through that analysis, but I believe certainly when we analyzed this last time, I think those numbers have changed as the costs have changed. And I think that's certainly something we're going to have to look very closely. But as right now, to answer the question, 2 of the trucks, the light-duty trucks, are proposed to be electric vehicles.
Okay, thank you. I'm worried about my time disappearing. Kind of an anecdotal thing. When one of my cars dies, I'm going to buy an electric car. I went to the Ford dealership in Totem Lake and pretty much waved money at them and said, I want to buy an electric Mustang. And they said, we have none. And I said, how soon will you have one? Will it be 1 year, 2 years? And they couldn't give me a straight answer. So you still have $82,000 in the budget for car chargers. I say, get rid of that. Get rid of that entire $82,000, put it into wood trails, do it this year. You have, as you had just mentioned, you have until 2030 to convert to electric vehicles. You can't even buy one now. I can't buy one. Maybe there are trucks, but I can't buy an electric car now. There's 4 electric chargers over at Bank America. I am a Bank America customer. I've never seen a car being charged there. 4 of them, a block away, existing, that could be used. Why do we need even one for the city to buy this year? We don't. Put that money into wood trails. And I guess that is pretty much all I was going to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex Campbell. Oh, I'm sorry, Steve Yabroff. I skipped over. Sorry.
Good evening. I want to thank you for your previous support of the Wood Trails Park. I noted that on May 3rd of this year, you passed Ordinance 733, putting the Wood Trails Park into the comprehensive plan. And then on August 9th, you passed Ordinance 738, the zoning map update that also rezoned it as a park. It's a good start. In looking at the Woodinville Community Priorities Report, I noted on page 2 in Exhibit 3 of the Woodinville Strategic Plan, quote, top quality of life priorities expressed in the community survey are to enhance and add new parks, trails, and recreation programs. Over half, 56% of the selections included one of these options. Then on page 3 in Exhibit 3 of the Woodinville Community Priorities Report, the top items listed under, quote, what quality of life issues matter most in Woodinville? The top issues were enhance existing parks and trails at 22% and add new parks and trails. This is a popular item. You see a lot of people here. You'll probably see more in the future in support of this. So I'm asking you, put $200,000 into the project now and make a firm commitment or resolution that you will commit to completing this project, say, by the end of 2024. The issue here isn't capacity or capability. It's a credibility issue. You have citizens who really want this, have wanted this for a long time. Do what you can within the constraints that you have, but you can make a commitment, so do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, Alex Campbell.
Good evening again. I'm Alex Campbell. I will also adjust my comments a little bit, but not entirely. To build on something that former Mayor Gary Harris pointed out, I will admit that my company, a different division of it, makes microchips. Our CEO has regular meetings with the employees and outlines the situation of the business. Nothing I'm going to say is insider trading, but I'm going to tell you that the microchip orders that we receive now will not be fulfilled for almost a full year. And as recent analysis I looked at, internal combustion engine cars generally have a few hundred microprocessors. An electric car generally has 10 times as many. doesn't take a lot to know that his experience trying to buy an electric vehicle, throwing money at people, is not going to happen. Also, since the city has to buy through, I believe, state procurement, there's an additional slowdown because you'll probably be at the back of the line, won't you? So I would encourage that we take a close look at what's the right spend on that, and that money could definitely be reallocated. As I mentioned earlier, the East Rail study seems like an awful lot of money to build a study, and certainly half of that would fund the entire phase 1 of Wood Trails. So regarding the phase 1 of Wood Trails, August 2nd, during Mr. Souza's presentation, following that, there was that discussion of $775,000 would provide us with a 2-mile trail system and the ADA parking. Obviously, we don't need the 2 miles. 1 mile would be great, but additional trails is the key. We want to show we're actually investing in this. And so I wanted to cite a couple of other things that were in that meeting. For those of you who want to follow along on the video later, 1 hour, 21 minutes, 30 seconds is where I start. Mayor Millman said, "I'm all in favor." A little bit later, Councilmember Best-Campbell said, "It's about time we do something with it." A little bit later, Councilmember Taylor said, "I'm in agreement with the phased process." A little bit later, Councilmember Evans, to reiterate what other council members have said, "I also am in favor of the phased approach." Councilmember Arndt then said, "I support the phased approach and think starting with an ADA spot and using the existing parking on the west side of the park." And finally, Deputy Mayor Randolph, it was the last quote I have, "I'm just going to go on record and chime in with everyone else for the phased approach." You were all speaking specifically to the phase 1 as described with $775,000. I think it's important to understand that your words have meaning, and everyone in the city will now be able to judge by your actions how much to trust your words. Please fully fund Wood Trails.
Thank you. Sorry, I got to put my readers on. Is it Shannon Peterson? Sharon? Thank you.
Sharon Peterson, I live in Woodinville. I'm in my riding togs because I came from the barn. So pardon the appearance. I don't always show up like this, but it is what it is. Most of you who are sitting up there were not sitting up there in 2004 when Concerned Neighbors of Wellington was formed. That was a mere 18 years ago. I moved into this neighborhood 17 years ago, started serving on the board 16 years ago, and 16 years later, I still serve on that board. The Concerned Neighbors of Wellington is the team who fought through 3 rounds of court hearings, all the way up to the state level, and won in front of the state Supreme Court the case to allow the city to preserve R1 and to make your own decisions. As part of that, the Wood Trails property was saved, and that effort took 2,000 pages of documentation, $200,000 of citizen money, thousands of hours of time of citizens to produce that documentation, convince you, a appeals hearing person, a district court, and then the Washington State Supreme Court that this was a good decision. So just to build on what Alex just said, all of you voiced verbal support for building out Wood Trails. The expectation of the 200 households who are part of the Concerned Neighbors of Wellington is that you will actually put your money where your mouth is and back up what you verbally said that you support. Just to reiterate the importance of Wood Trails, it's a wildlife corridor. The 2,000 pages of documentation document all sorts of wildlife that uses those trails to get to water sources, which they otherwise would not be able to get to. As was previously mentioned in somebody else's comments, there is already very strong support for parks. And it's possible that the intersection of the lines of spend and revenue in 2 years means that perhaps the plans for other projects are a little too aggressive, given that there's already a carryover of, 7 or 8 projects that were on the books but not completed. Maybe by ratcheting back your expectations a tad bit, you'll be able to put a rational amount of work onto your team, your staffs, the council, and not overburden or not set expectations and be able to underpromise and overdeliver instead of the other way around. The last thing I want to say is I was in a meeting not too long ago and somebody brought up the OSO slide. And somebody said, the people who built in Oso where the slide happened were warned not to build on that landslide hazard area. So if anybody had any other plans for what they think they should do with wood trails, let me remind you that, again, those 1,200 or 2,000 pages of documentation clearly articulate that that is a high landslide risk area. So wouldn't it be great if this council had a vision for the future that's kind of like that trestle and decided to create a park that the wildlife could use, the humans could use, bicyclers could possibly use, who knows who could use it, and created a vision for wood trails being where rural meets city and where the two can coexist and where I can come in my riding togs and talk to you and not feel terribly embarrassed about it. So thank you. I hope you will support it. I hope, as Alex indicated, you will invest more than $62,000, so you're really demonstrating that you do heavily support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Shan Evans.
I am Shan Evans, and I live in the Woodinville city limits. I need to tell you that what I was going to say is not at all what you're about to hear. It's almost emotional for me to stand here as the public spaces chair and listen to the people who have come out tonight and talk about what this project means to them. So while I've been confused for a while, I am pissed now. The budget that you wrote, was that with input from this council? Can somebody talk to me about this new sidewalk? Because I read every month, I read your minutes, I read everything. And I have been doing so for nearly a year. So I know a lot more about this city and about this council and about the staff than anyone here thinks I do. Why is this the first time I'm hearing about a sidewalk? Where is this thing? Was someone killed in that neighborhood that requires us to have it put in? It came out of nowhere, and you're going to give us signage for wood trails? And you're contemplating funding a sidewalk that someone came up with weeks ago? Would someone like to take 30 seconds of my time and explain that to me?
I can speak to that because I was remote and was paying very close attention because I was remote. One of the things that came up during our previous budget discussion was the idea of the additional sidewalk as a safe way to school for children up in that area. I went up, I saw the area. I think it made sense. It makes sense as something that we may be able to get some level of funding for the safe to school transportation network. So putting it on the budget, making it available as something that we have a plan for means that we can get additional funding.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to call crap on that. I appreciate you going up to look at it. You're not an expert, but I do appreciate you going up to look at it. I'm not saying that it's not important. I don't know where it is. I know nothing about it. All I'm saying is that not a single person in the city of Woodinville that filled out that survey or that has talked to this council has ever mentioned a sidewalk And I'm not saying it shouldn't happen. You know what? I've decided that I want to use my full time, okay? You'll have time when I'm done. My point is that you are giving us $62,000 for signage to say, you know what? Shut the hell up. Here's some money. This thing has gone on for 20 years. It can go on for another 3 or 4. You've got money. You have the money to do something more significant than $62,000. So at this point, it feels personal, okay? For the past several months, I have just thought that priorities didn't align. You know, I am all for car chargers, and I am all for you getting your vehicles. I don't have a problem with 2 electric vehicles and a car charger. I am all for moving the world in that direction. But I feel like you should be able to find enough money in this budget to give the city of Woodinville, the citizens of this city, and the people that have shown up here week after week and month after month, how dare you offer them $62,000?
To make clear, one of the things that does happen when we're sitting up on the dais, the people sitting in the audience get a much louder voice than the people that send emails. You didn't see the emails that came in talking about, hey, my child is not getting to school safely. That tugs at the heartstrings.
You should make that public. You should make those emails public, and I'd like a count. I'd like to know how many people.
I would love to do that, and I believe, Madam Clerk, we can make those things public, but they're sent in, and we get to see those coming across our desk, and we don't get a lot of time to discuss them or think about them, but when they show up in email and we get to discuss it on the dais, we did actually bring that up during a meeting, and this was the last time that we discussed the budget. And that's where that movement came from. And it makes sense not just from a perspective of safety for children getting to school. It's also an effort of there's already funding available for safe children to school. So we saw it as a movement of going, we can actually put this in our plan, and next year we'll be able to apply for some of that funding. So the money that we've set aside in the budget, we have hopes to actually be able to reallocate that funding. But if we don't have it on our plan, we don't get it. And I think that's a theme throughout our budget, like the electric car charger. In 2030, they've said no more gas vehicles. In forward thinking, we have to say everybody's gonna want that grant money come 2030. We need to get to the front of the line, the very front of the line. And that's what we're thinking when we say, can we think about that car charger now? Because if we're not at the front of the line, that's funding that we don't get. The same's true for a couple other things, but I'll leave it there.
Point of order. This is a public hearing, not a discussion.
This is actually allowed in our rules, and I'll allow it.
I'm sorry, point of order.
Your point is not well taken.
Let's talk to the parliamentarian.
I've already addressed this
Jeff?
prior to the meeting.
Mr. Ganson?
I'm not identified in code as a parliamentarian. The chair's ruling stands.
You know what?
Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Badger citizens.
And it's not badgering the citizen. I'm just bringing about clarity. Ms. Evans asked a question, and she told me that I could wait my turn to the end, and that's exactly what we did. We have to figure out a way to actually communicate with our citizenry.
I don't have a problem with that, and I appreciate what you shared, and I agree with much of what you shared. And I believe that this room is filled with smart people who know how to write a budget and do their job. I just feel insulted at the amount of money that this collective group is offering to Wood Trails, given the amount of passion and interest that has been coming your way for months. I decided here tonight that this is personal. This, all of a sudden, has become very, very clear to me that this has nothing to do with a budget. It has nothing to do with what the citizens of Woodinville want, but this is some sort of internal, personal fight that somebody is determined to win at the expense of the people who have asked for this. We're not asking you for $3 million tonight. We're asking you for a couple of $100,000 in a show of good faith.
Okay, thank you. We can open up for questions from council. Anybody have a question? Councilmember Best-Campbell.
So apropos of Wood Trails, I'm looking here in the agenda packet. So there's the aforementioned $62,000 for construction of signage. Now, my recollection is that this is called Wood Trails, not Wood Signs. So I think that's inadequate expenditure. I agree that it's a tokenization intended to mollify a neighborhood that has been advocating for a park that actually the entire city has asked for. There are two little tick items in 2025 and 2026 for design and construction. Those are placeholders. That is a soft commitment. Forget the fact that there's an election between now and then. There is no boots on the ground, blood, skin in the game for funding 2025 to 2026. So if we say, wow, $62,000, they really saw us, that's it. This will never come back up again because it will require the same outlay of time and effort by the neighborhood of Wellington, by the people of the downtown who have also advocated for this program. We won't get this groundswell again, and that's what this council is banking on. So I'm in support of funding it at a $200,000 level. I support it at $775,000. I think that telling the city, hang on, we're doing another study. Nobody wants a study. We can wait until we get park impact fees from the new construction that is along the East Rail corridor, I might add. So why not add that to the budget and not expend it until we get those park impact fees? It can still stay in the budget, but let's have an order of operation shift here. I think it's important to continue with promises that have been made to a community. This is a beloved park. This is something that people have asked for. To say that is anything more than that, I think is a shame. This is something that should unite the city. And I recall in 2020, our last council meeting before COVID shut us down, I sat with the deputy mayor and we talked emotionally around a table, socially distanced, about adding a token $100,000 to the budget for something for our community to look forward to when we come out of COVID. And here we are out of COVID with more money than we know what to do with, and we're getting the back of the head and $62,000. I think that is grossly offensive. I think that it is not listening to the people of Woodinville. And I would also add, there are two more items that are not added to this agenda, conspicuously absent. There is a two-block section of the downtown area in our naturally affordable housing area with apartments and condos that does not have lighting. $200,000, not even close, less than that. That's nowhere on the budget. That is cheap and cheerful. That is a perfect budget a budget item that we could add. We didn't add it. We have an opportunity to make a crosswalk behind Target, a full stop, so that people are not run over by the people who speed 90% of the time through that corridor. That's not added to this budget either. So what is in this budget? What I see in this budget is goodies for developers. We have two development agreements at $4 million a pop that require the city to expend our capital budget. The citizens have not asked for that. We didn't drive a good enough bargain. When we have development agreements in front of us, we should not capitulate. We should demand more because we're desirable. For now, what I see in this budget has nothing to do with the people of Woodinville. Not one thing in there is something that I can be proud of. It's a study. It's looking to the future. It's things that we need to work on. Sure, But I am answerable to the people who are here. I am answerable to the people on email. And I will say, in the past few days, I have received quite a few emails asking for a 2-block stretch of downtown Woodinville to be lit. And that doesn't make the budget, because I guess that neighborhood doesn't matter as much as the new neighborhoods. Everybody in Woodinville has a voice. We need to make sure that our projects occupy the length and breadth and do the most good and have the most bang for the buck. What I see here does none of it, and it pushes forward an agenda that does not represent what the people have come and asked us for. So I say we fund Wood Trails, $775,000, no reason not to. We can push out funding of any studies, and this is a good faith effort because we ultimately represent the people. And what matters to me is not what any regional interest thinks in me. What matters to me is that the people in this room feel that I am representing them. So as such, fund Wood Trails, fund the lighting on 181st Place, and please put in a fully signalized stop behind the Target. This isn't hard. Well, I don't know why this is so hard.
Any other comments, questions? So I think I did a little bit of this earlier. I want to lay out a timeline, and these are actually facts. So I think as it's been stated before, I think 2013, 2016, money was allocated for the 56 acres in Wood Trails to preserve that area. After 2016, nothing happened. I mean, nothing that I'm aware of happened, nothing changed. And the current council that is being berated actually made it a park. It could have been made a park years ago. It wasn't. It was made a park by this council. And the current council is proposing, or is on the budget, to move forward with some signage, which is required as a park. And it's also to mitigate some hazards, which is a prudent way to eliminate some of the liability that could go on in there, and those are the obvious next steps. The other phased approach, the only thing I remember voting on was a proposal that had parking up in the Wellington cul-de-sacs. It had a Santa can attached to it, and there was ADA parking somewhere, and I can't remember where it was. We voted that down, and it might have been unanimous. And since then, there hasn't been anything for us to vote on. Phased approach or anything. So these other variations have not came in front of us. I am on record, and I still approve and want to see Wood Trails developed out. But we need to do it we need to identify where the parking is. We need to identify where the ADA parking, the general parking. We need to identify if and where and if we should have a bathroom somewhere. I don't think a Santa can in a cul-de-sac in a residential area is what I would vote for, but do we need one? I don't know, but it's worth a discussion. So that's the first part. The lighting thing, that has not come before us. I'm all in favor of anything for public safety. That's my number one priority. And if that's a safety item, it's just like the sidewalks. There was talk about the sidewalks. There's a long stretch near a elementary school that does not have sidewalks for kids to be able to safely get to school. I support that because it is a safety item. This council can arguably said that we've moved the ball further than any previous council, possibly, other than the funding on Wood Trails. We voted unanimously to make it a park. It preserves the property. We intend, I'm on the record in public meeting, we intend to, as best as I can tell, we intend to develop that very thoughtfully and make that a good park that you guys will all be proud of. But why 6 years, nothing, and then all of a sudden we're in hyper speed on this? I don't get it. But we are headed in the right direction, and it might not be as fast as some would like, but I think we're heading in the right direction. But Deputy Mayor Randolph.
So as a member of the Wellington community, I definitely understand the importance of that area. I play in that area. My kids play in that area. But what I want to understand from the constituency, what is the urgency? That's what I'm hearing from the mayor. What's the urgency right now? So we can think about it in terms of why now? Because, like I said, I believe to Mr. Best-Campbell's, Mr. Campbell's quote of me. I said I believe in a phased approach. I'll say again, I believe in a phased approach. The question is what those phases are. The thing that we did in that previous meeting is actually instruct staff to actually do some interviews in that area, understand what's necessary within the area to actually execute. And I would like to say one more thing. I fully believe that this is something that will happen as part of our long, extensive plan as a city. East Rail, we've talked about it several times now, but have we looked at this trail being a connection point that helps connect to East Rail, the whole city connected end to end? And that's part of my vision, and I hope I can hand some of that to you. But that's where we are, as it should go as a city. It's not going to happen immediately, but there's a lot of opportunities to actually do that. And I'm sorry, sir, please.
I think the mayor has to recognize me.
Yes, Mr. Glickman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is your question rhetorical as to why now, or would you like an answer?
It is not.
So it's actually 30 years. People have been asking for this park since the city was founded. Why now? Well, in the last 6 years, nothing's been done. And not to get overly dramatic, but I've had friends who really wanted to have this park who just died because it hasn't been done. It's time. It's past its time. It's 30 years people have been asking for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council members' comments, questions? Councilmember Best-Campbell, your second turn.
It is my second turn. I'm looking at our agenda from the August 2nd meeting. We have a phase 1 approach, which includes, let's see here. Phase 1 would address an immediate or early phase of the project. This would include providing 2 parking stalls, one for accessible parking and one for a portable restroom, which at that meeting we declined to suggest in addition to. But what we also had in that meeting was a layout and a cost analysis of how much material it would cost. So we had costs for gravel. We had costs for bark. We had costs for everything laid out. We had it. It was all there in front of us, and everyone had agreed, yes, this is something that looks good. We have the information. To say we don't have enough information to make a decision, there are a number of budget items up there that we've never had an analysis of, and yet they've been added. This one has been asked for. The reason it wasn't asked for in the last 6 years, I've been on the council for 3. When I got on council, this was my first meeting. This item was the first thing I brought up, and I'll be damned if I let it go. This is something that's important. This is something that people have asked for. The urgency is the people asked for it. That's it. There doesn't have to be a global reason why. You ask, I deliver. That's my job. That is our job, to deliver for you. So if you want something and I think it's outlandish, my job is to represent you. I can maybe make it a little bit better and file down the edges a little bit, but ultimately, my responsibility is to the people. I also wanted to bring up that we have had people come to this meeting and ask for lighting in the neighborhood. I would say that Chair Stadler has come repeatedly and asked for this. I know that James and Honey Bears have come and asked for improved lighting on the street. These are not items you should have to ask twice for. We're concerned about pedestrian safety for kids going to school. That's how I got into council. It matters to me too. I'm not suggesting we get rid of that sidewalk. What I am suggesting is that pedestrian safety matters everywhere, not just some places in Woodinville. So we have heard from the public for these studies. We have heard that the phase 1 of Wood Trails, everyone in the audience knows what it is. Everyone out there can describe exactly what's in phase 1, yet somehow those of us on the dais plead ignorance. We didn't have enough information. We did. I'm looking at the agenda item, August 2nd. Look at the packet that we were provided with. My job is to represent you. You tell me what you want. My job is to advocate as strongly as I can. I cannot understand why this budget is written the way it is. The last budget, we had a scoring system where we got to rank each and every budget item that we had based on importance. This year, we didn't have that. It just appears in front of us. And then this budget packet appears right before we have a chance to discuss this item. So none of us have had an opportunity to read this either. So we're supposed to have a public hearing and have a really wonderful discourse with the public about what we're providing, but we can't because we don't have that information, which is unfair to you. You are here for the public hearing so that you can tell us, are we close? From what I'm hearing tonight, we're not close. So we should go back and refine until we get and meet your expectations, because your expectations are what dictate how I operate here. You want something, I fight for it. That's my job. And it should be all of council's job to listen. There doesn't have to be a sense of urgency. Why do you want it? You just do. And that's the brilliance of our system. As elected officials, you elect us, therefore you tell us what to do. And our job, if we would like to be elected again, is to respond to you. This is a very simple system. So I say we have to go back and look at this again through the prism of who asked for this? Why are they asking for it? To me, if the plurality of Woodinville asked for something, then they should damn well get it. If 4 people are asking for an item, we should consider possibly this is something that we can prioritize a little bit lower on the list. If staff is overworked, I don't want to add another study that is going to make things impossible for them.
Councilmember Best-Campbell, your time is approaching.
Thank you. In closing, I do think this budget has a lot of room for improvement, particularly since our citizens haven't had a chance to see it.
Councilmember Evans.
Thank you. It is true. We got the budgets. You saw us get handed to us. We haven't had a chance to look at this. But we have been talking about many of these things for a long time. I recall in the August meeting, my #1 question about the Wood Trails project is where will people park? Because the proposal was that we were going to use street parking, but we weren't clear if the street parking was for a specific amount of time. We weren't clear how much street parking there was, and we weren't clear on how people would get from one part to the other. I don't want to create a nightmare situation where people are parking all over the place on nice days, and we get tons of angry citizens who come in and say, I can't even enjoy my yard because there's people parked all over the place. I want to make sure that we have that. That is the #1 question that I have. I agree. I do not want that porta potty in a residential area. That is a horrible idea. I also really want to make sure that this is accessible. We've already spent $100 and some thousand studying this area to make sure that we have a plan. I want to make sure that everybody can go, not just able-bodied people. I want to make sure that as we open these parks and trails that we're thinking about all sorts of people and that we don't just throw money at a problem without properly thinking through where are people going to park, how are people going to access this. Those are my big questions. I do support the phase plan, and I support using our park impact fees for this because we have a lot of park impact fees coming, and they can only be used on parks. So why not get a good plan in place and then use those park impact fees? Finally, there are many, many, many people in this city. Yes, we have cited the studies that show that people want parks and trails. That is 100% true. But there's also other things that people want, and it's our job to look at all of those. One of the biggest things that affects people's ability to enjoy Woodinville is the horrible traffic and not being able to get around the city any way other than in a car. I've heard that over and over as I've talked to citizens, as I've gone door to door, as I've had email interactions. And that is part of the reason why we're doing these grid roads. That's part of the reason we're doing the trestle, is because as all this development comes, it's only going to get worse if we don't deal with the problem now. Thank you.
Councilmember Rubstell, I apologize. I keep forgetting to look up on the screen. Do you have anything you'd like to add while I'm looking up on the screen?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Taylor.
So I live in the neighborhood. I know all these people in CNW. I know the impact of a city council that wasn't listening and working with a side agenda. I know what could happen, and it did happen in the neighborhood. And there was a big fight, and Mr. Glickman can, attest. There were many people that were impacted. It woke up the neighborhood. We became very active. We were spending our Monday nights, I believe at the time, Monday nights was right here every week, Monday night. We had council meeting every week. We were here, we were filming it, and it became a very big issue for the neighborhood. They fought it. They got together, they organized, they fought, and they found people in the community that would listen to them and elected those people into city council, took the fight back, that Sharon Peterson was mentioning, took the fight to the state and won our right to control zoning and planning for our community. Nobody else can do that for us. So they've put in a lot of effort. They still have that, when they hear a delay, they don't see commitment. They're looking at us that we're waffling. They've seen it before. And anyway, let me bring it up a few years back, probably 3 or 4. We had a council member up here talk to an outside person in the county, and they were talking about what's the how do the neighbors feel about this park? And somebody, council member, was able to talk about it and say, I don't think the neighbors really want it. I don't think they would accept outsiders coming in and having cars parked in the neighborhood, and I don't think they want it. Well, that cost us a great deal of money and funding at the time, and it also cost the council member censure by the entire council, because it's something that we wanted. This is not brand new. It's not 6 months. This has been out here being brought up every time we go through capital planning. We have a park project that is more important, or we have something that kind of pushes this one back. We have the DeYoung Park work. It pushed it back. We have upgrades of the AstroTurf on the field, or we have playfield equipment. We have something that's going to take priority, but this always gets pushed back. Now is the time, I think, that we go to phase 1 and we start acting. The urgency also has to do with some of the outside activity that's happening in King County and in the state, and there is a threat on the residential neighborhoods once again that I think people are keeping their eyes open, and they're proactive, and they're thinking about it. It's because they have gone through this ordeal in the past. They are
Councilmember Taylor, wrap it up, please. Your 3 minutes is up.
3 minutes? 5 minutes?
Can you finish your thought? Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Go continue.
So there is a lot of uncertainty. If you push this thing out again for 2 or 3 years, anything can happen. I think the gentleman mentioned that. It's a stroke of a pen. It's a new council. Something can happen, and I don't think that's right. And back to Councilmember Best-Campbell, we're elected to represent the community. We're representing what you want and bringing it forward. We're not looking out and telling you what's best for you. We're not looking to the external and bringing something in and putting it on the agenda. So I appreciate the comment. The sidewalks are another area. I think we should have sidewalks and safe walks to school. it's been fought for. It's been neglected. It's been punted to the school district. It's been punted all over. I think we should be looking at that too in the future. But this park has to be on the capital plan going forward. We have to have more than signs. Thank you.
Councilmember Arndt? Anybody that hasn't spoken yet? Councilmember Arndt?
Thank you. I've mostly been listening tonight. As it was mentioned, we were handed our budget packet just as the discussion was starting. So I feel like I would like to spend some time really going through the details before I make some grand pronouncements about what should stay and what should go. I always think it's good to look at the funding levels there. I appreciate the passion behind the Wood Trails project, and I stand behind my statements that I do think it is a good project and that it should be moving forward. However, as of right now, I still feel like waiting for those park impact fees is the most responsible way of funding that for the next few years. And I know that we don't have a date for those fees, but I do think that it could be a relatively short amount of time as we're moving projects forward here in the pipeline of downtown Woodinville. We have a lot of big projects that are working. We have a lot more big projects that are coming in the next couple of months. So I don't personally see that as a long-term punt on this project, but simply awaiting until the check clears kind of thing. And I have been receiving a lot more communication about the lighting on 181st, and I'd like to look a little bit more about where we could potentially work that in, because again, that is a public safety concern, and I'd like to see that. And mostly I'd like to spend some quality time with this budget book and come back and engage again at our next meeting.
Anybody else? All right, seeing none, I just want to talk a little bit. It's been brought up a couple of times about, I think we've talked a lot about Wood Trails, and I think the audience and everybody has seen that. I think the council unanimously, as we voted it to be a park, we unanimously support moving it forward in some fashion. And I think how we get there, you know, what was the only thing that was in front of us to be voted on, I voted against it because it had a traffic impact and parking impact. In fact, I joked with the deputy mayor that I'm going to park in front of his mailbox to access the park, and that was facetious, but it highlighted my concern that to access the trails, you're going to have to go through a neighborhood and park in a neighborhood, and then there was a Santa can in the neighborhood, and it just wasn't. It just wasn't what I think. In fact, people up in Wellington actually pushed back on that design, and particularly people who were going to be impacted in those cul-de-sacs where it was going to be placed. So we were responsive to people that were going to be affected by that. And right now, I might be wrong. I don't think I am. There is not a plan or a costing. The plan we saw had parking up there, had a bathroom up there. It had everything was up in the R1. To move it absolutely changes the dollars. And since it's been time, it'll change how it looks. You know, an ADA site, for example, you can't have an ADA site, you know, here and then immediately go up a steep grade that's not accessible for somebody with a disability. So that has to be studied. And at this point, whether we have a bathroom or not is not decided. So I'm telling everybody on a public meeting, I support Wood Trails. I want to see it move forward. We're doing it in a very thoughtful manner, and I can make the argument that we have moved pretty far in just 22 on Wood Trails, making it a park, adding money, and taking some of the mitigation hazards away. The car chargers have come up quite a bit, and And as most people know, that is something that I've been pushing, and let me give you my reasons why. So one, there's $2 billion, and that's with a B, coming from the federal government for car chargers, for grant money for car chargers. That's one. I think we have a great opportunity to add to our infrastructure, and electrification and car chargers are infrastructure for the city. And we're talking about city property for city vehicles for electrification. I have a study from the PSE that shows that every 4 vehicles that we buy for the fleet for the city saves $10,888 a year in operating and maintenance costs. So if we can get car chargers with a grant and then save the citizens $10,888 a year, and the bonus is we do a smaller part towards climate change. And if everybody here has been breathing the same smoke I have been, we hit heat records here in October. I think this is something that shows leadership in this area, and climate change and climate action plans are something that is in our strategic vision and has been placed as a priority for the city. So I just want to clarify that this is a cost-friendly move. It's a move for climate action. So, Mr. Yabroff.
Thank you. To respond to Deputy Mayor Randolph's question, why now? It isn't really a question of why now. It's a question, this is something the citizens have wanted and asked for a long time. I appreciate all of you saying you support the park. The real question is credibility. It's gone on, it's been deferred, and so forth. If you pass a binding resolution committing to doing this within a fixed period of time, I think that's going to help resolve some of the issues and questions and concerns. Barring that, you're going to have citizens here, probably for the next 2 or 3 meetings, while we all enjoy the budget novel that has been so carefully written. And we will, I'm sure, be thrilled to put it under our pillow each night. But, you know, this is an opportunity. There are a lot of things, you'll have a lot of competing equities and questions and so forth. And as you go through the budget, I'm sure you can find some wiggle room in there and say, okay, we really need to do this. If you make it a priority, you make the commitment, and you make it binding, you could pass a binding commitment tonight. I think it's going to settle the issue. This is something people have wanted, they've asked for a long time. Here's your opportunity. Thank you.
Stephanie.
I'm Stephanie Young. I live in the city of Woodinville. I've been in the Wellington neighborhood for 16 years. I live on one of the streets that people would drive down to park their cars on the park. I have repeatedly, I'll start over. I support the park. I like the idea of the park. I think there is a happy place, someplace between $775,000 and $62,000 that allows us to commit a certain amount of money and ask the people who are really standing behind this to put some blood and sweat into the park. I've heard Rachel be a proponent of that as well, getting the community behind it. But I do know that every time I bring up that park, anybody who lives on those streets will say, all of those people are going to drive down our street. And I think that's an important point. If you don't live on the street, you're not going to see it, but it does matter to the people in the neighborhood. So, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Harris.
Gary Harris. I live within the city of Woodinville. So, first of all, Mr. Millman, how dare you say to me that you are the first to do something with wood trails, or that you've moved the ball farther down the line than anyone else? I was mayor last year. You think I've forgotten what I presided over in these meetings? Last year, we had, with wood trails, we had a very detailed map of the area. We had different colors for phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 of where the trails would be. Phase 1 were trails that connected existing trails that were on less steep areas of the 50 plus acres. And then phase 2 and phase 3. Phase 3, you got down near the Public Works building where it was steeper, and that would require more work and more money. But last year, we talked about phase 1 and doing phase 1, and it was going to be $300 and X thousand dollars. We talked about that last year. So do not say to me, why now when nothing has been done? Do not say to me that where did this come from? Out of nowhere. Thank you.
I just want to clarify, I never did say that I did anything. This council voted unanimously to make this a park, and I'm very proud of that fact. It's something that we've accomplished, and what I said was that for 6 years, nothing had been done, and in 2022, this council made it a park, and we also have money in the budget to actually move things forward. So that was my point. Unless any other council members have any problems, I think everybody's wanted to speak has spoken. Okay. Madam Clerk, can I get that one? So I apologize if this is a little jumbled. Some people have already stepped up to the microphone. They're on this list, but I'll just go in order to just finish this off. Stephanie Young. Sabika, I'm sorry, I'm going to not pronounce this name correctly, Makadum? Okay. Sharon Peterson. Thank you. And Jeff Glickman.
Jeff Glickman, live at 19405 148th Avenue Northeast, and I live in the city limits. Changing topics, safe walk to schools. So this is an informative comment, probably something you're not aware of. So there's a school in town called Chrysalis. They have changed the configuration of their campuses. The western school, the one out on 202, is now partially an elementary school. And you may or may not be aware of the transfer station, which King County is planning to put in adjacent to the school. So if you're actually serious about safe walk to schools, you need to be aware that there's a problem there. I've spent countless hours trying to work with the county, only to be completely ignored. This is, I think, the time for the city to step up and take over this issue, because there is going to be truck after truck after truck running through there with young kids running back and forth right in front of them. It needs to be fixed now.
I appreciate that, and we have pointed that out to the county, that exact fact about the school location and the trucks, and lots of other issues and problems we have with the siting on the transfer station.
But you're missing a fact, and the fact is it's now an elementary school. It wasn't before. It is now.
Okay, good point, good to know, thank you. I understand we're keeping the public hearing open for another approximately a month.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. So the motion in your pack would be a move to continue the concurrent public hearings to the November 1st meeting when we can continue this conversation.
Great. In that case, I do move to continue this open public hearing into November 1st.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. So public comments, I think we've exhausted that, I believe. Reports, city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. The only thing I'll this evening is just reiterate, if you have any questions, I know you just got these packets. We finished these at 5:30 this evening. Certainly wasn't expecting to have all the information and be well versed in this. So to that end, as I offered before, feel free to reach out to myself and the finance director with any questions, clarifications between now and the next meeting, and we'll certainly be prepared for a even lengthier conversation at that meeting. So that's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Brandon? Okay, seeing none. Reports, council members. Councilmember Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. Councilmember Perry did a workshop earlier this week on property taxes and how the county is doing that. We're not raising taxes, but people might see taxes go up. And so I'm going to ask if we can just make that information available. Specifically, she went over a senior exemption for deferrals of the property tax. And I want to make sure that we let our citizens know about that, especially since house values have gone up so much. People are going to see their taxes go up, even though the percentage isn't going up. So I want to make sure that we let folks know because, I mean, on a $694,000 home, it could be up to $5,400 that they save in property taxes. So thank you.
Councilmember Robstello?
Nothing, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Randolph?
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Councilmember Best-Campbell?
Yes, so apropos of NERTs, we had a MISWAC meeting on Friday in which we were told of 5 upcoming open houses for the public to make their opinions known on what you would like to have included in the environmental impact study. So environmental impact is beyond just the environment. It also has to do with the economic and the traffic mitigations that would be required to be studied. So there are 4 opportunities. I will forward the slide deck on to the city manager so that we can have it perhaps blasted out on our social media channels and also the city's website. The location that would in Woodinville would be at Brightwater on December 8th. You are free to attend any and all meetings, which I would recommend. There's also a siting advisory group on November 2nd, in which the group will also discuss what we would like to have studied within that review. It'll also be instructive to hear what they choose to ignore and apply, because that will inform what we will be doing for our concurrent environmental impact study that the city is doing. And one question about that in the budget. So we have $350,000 set aside. Is all of that for a study, or is there some legal aspect to that 350, or is it a slush fund of sorts for trash?
The 350 it's 200 for the economic piece, 100 for the transportation piece, and we're still working on, it's going to be under the 50 for the actual environmental, the wetland piece. I don't recall off the top of my head, because it's been numbers all day, what we have in the legal budget for NERTs. I don't remember offhand.
Okay, so there's a possibility that after that November 2nd meeting, we will need to come back and discuss in the future adding a legal fund for NERTs, just to have it in the coffers when the environmental impact study comes out next fall. So it's something to think about.
Councilmember Arndt?
Thank you. Just real quick. I know it doesn't feel like winter's coming necessarily, but it's coming. And there will be a severe weather shelter opening up in Shoreline starting November 1st for any nights where the temperature is dropping down and it's getting cold, for anyone who is in need of housing.
Councilmember Taylor?
Nothing more. Yeah.
I have nothing else but I do want to tell everybody I appreciate everybody taking their time. Council meetings, particularly budgetary, aren't usually the most exciting thing, but thank you for all the input and participation. And so with that, I think I'll take a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor?